In case you missed it, the Jason universe has been birthed. What's the Jason universe? Great question. Before we dig into the newest slice of Voorhees-based content, let's go over a little background information. See, for the longest time, there's been a legal battle raging between the original Friday the 13th writer Victor Miller and director Sean S. Cunningham. Miller figured that as writer of the OG flick, he deserved some semblance of ownership, despite really not creating the most famous element, Jason in the hockey mask, and when you get right down to it, barely creating Jason in the first place, at least in the way we know him. His argument was that as an independent contractor, he was entitled to authorship rights. However, Cunningham countered that Miller was a work-for-hire writer working from Cunningham's initial idea. In 2018, Miller seemingly won the case when a U.S. District Court judge ruled that Miller was indeed an independent contractor. Cunningham appealed, thereby dragging the case out even further. This dispute was seemingly concluded in September 2021 when the Second U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals held in favor of Miller, who thereby gained the rights to the Friday the 13th franchise. However, things get a little sticky once you delve into the details. See, Miller owns all the intellectual property for the original Friday the 13th, but as I mentioned before, that doesn't include adult Jason, as the character, a hulking hockey mask-wearing madman, isn't in the original film. It's his mom, Pamela Voorhees, who's the killer, spoiler alert, and Jason only shows up at the end as a child in a dream sequence. Cunningham, meanwhile, still owns the intellectual property developed by the sequel, so while Miller seemingly came out on top, he really only has the plot beats from that original film. On Halloween of 2022, we got a big announcement. A24 was teaming up with Hannibal's Bryan Fuller to produce a Friday the 13th prequel series entitled Crystal Lake, with Victor Miller on board as executive producer. Eventually, Fuller was let go in June of 2024, with Brad Caleb Kane brought in to run the show in August. And since then, things have been going pretty smoothly for the show. We've even gotten a look at the lake and a clapperboard from the shoot, and tons of casting news, including Linda Cardellini as Pamela Voorhees and Callum Benson as Jason. But of course, the problem arises. It's a prequel series. That's not quite the same thing as a new Friday the 13th movie, you dig? Of course, I did skip over yet another wrinkle. See, in May 2024, Cunningham's company Horror Incorporated announced the launch of the Jason universe in collaboration with Victor Miller. The wonky Jason universe name is due to New Line Cinema owning the rights to the title Friday the 13th, and the idea behind the new universe is to expand into all sorts of multimedia and branding opportunities for everyone's favorite machete-wielding maniac. Anyway, enter Sweet Revenge, a new short film that debuted on the Jason Universe YouTube channel this week, written and directed by Mike P. Nelson, whom you may know as the director of the 2021 reboot of the Wrong Turn franchise, as well as the upcoming Silent Night, Deadly Night reboot. It's also sponsored by Angry Orchard, you know, the cider guys. So, boy howdy, I do hope you enjoy apples with your violent gore and youthful shenanigans. Here's the good news. Sweet Revenge is a perfectly serviceable little short film set in the world of Friday the 13th. Obviously, we can't call it that because we live in a legal hellscape where we as fans aren't allowed to get what we want, but I digress. As a short horror flick, Sweet Revenge is an enjoyable enough 13 minutes. That said, it does have an unwelcome surprise up its sleeve, plus a few other little issues that might very well sink it all the way to the bottom of that damn lake. So spoilers ahead, or just go ahead and watch the damn thing. Whatever. It's 13 minutes. Pause this video, go watch the thing, come on back, then you won't get spoiled. Dig? And actually, there's not a whole lot to dig into as far as the plot for Sweet Revenge is concerned. We follow a group of what I guess are meant to be young adults in their early 20s who travel up to a familiar lakeside location for a little rest and relaxation. At least I hope they're in their 20s, because otherwise they might be drinking all that hard cider illegally. We don't want people drinking illegally. Among them is Eve, who's recently engaged to this guy Kyle. They arrive and are greeted by an old-timer with a love of apples, who warns Eve that there's a dark history behind their present location.
Property's had a bit of a troubled past.
She goes out to the lake, inviting Kyle along, presumably to enjoy a nice cold hard cider, but he doesn't show up, and while out on a little canoe ride, enjoying a hard-earned bottle of Angry Orchard, she's nabbed by Jason in his classic style. We then skip ahead to nighttime and Eve is inexplicably alive. She makes her way back to the cabins where she discovers the old Apple lover Harold has been brutally murdered in Jason's first Apple-based homicide. Eve finds more bodies of characters we've never met before spying on Kyle macking out with Eve's best friend. What a chode. Before she can do anything about it, she's confronted by Jason in what I assume is meant to be an epic mask reveal. The friends are attacked, Kyle gets brutally killed with a previously introduced boat motor, Natch, and despite Eve being stabbed in the midsection with a machete, she and her friend escape in the group's car. But uh-oh, something's not quite right with Eve, and so she winds up stabbing her friend to death and crashing the car. She then gets out, confronts Jason, and that's it. Cliffhanger, baby! Now, there's a few things you may have noticed. The first is that while there are a lot of apples in this thing, including an attempt by Jason at using an apple slicer as a weapon, it's actually not that bad as far as product placement goes. I guess I was anticipating long, sexy shots of hard apple cider bottles. But for the most part, I thought the booze was well integrated, for the most part. The second thing is Jason. He looks a little wonky. While the actor playing him is reportedly 6'5", he still looks a bit thin and small for Jason. I think that's partly just down to the camera angles. For example, this wide shot makes our boy look absolutely puny. I've also seen a lot of folks criticizing the mask, and yeah, when you get a good look at the thing, it does look off. The eyes are too square and close together, there's not enough breathing holes, and the chevrons are just obnoxiously large. It's a questionable approach, and it's shocking that it was designed by effects legend Greg Nicotero. Seriously, Greg Nicotero, he designed this bland Spirit Halloween Jason costume. I don't know. But perhaps the biggest sticking point for fans is the ending, wherein Eve seems to have been resurrected by Crystal Lake, a la Pet Sematary, and transformed into what? A female Jason? An apple cider zombie? It's hard to say, but the fact that she takes a machete like a champ and then feels confident about taking on Jason in the end suggests there's some supernatural tomfoolery going on. And like, no, stop. Why? It's such a befuddling choice and one that only suggests storylines that Friday the 13th fans are unlikely to want to see on screen.
I don't want to see that. I don't want to see that.
Is Eve joining Jason? Is she now his apprentice a la Corey Cunningham in Halloween Ends? I don't know if you guys remember, but that was not a well-received choice. So yeah, the short is weird. I know most people are ragging on it for being a glorified commercial for alcoholic cider, but what strikes me most about Sweet Revenge is just how much it feels like another fan film. Sure, the gore is impressive, but we mostly just see aftermath shots, and the characters aren't nearly as well fleshed out as the dude in Never Hike Alone, for example. As it stands, that fan film is much more in line with what the Friday the 13th community deserves after years of waiting for new material. This? It's kinda lame, especially as the starting point for the so-called Jason universe, which is a stupid name. I apparently have a lot of opinions about the Jason universe. But hey, that's just my opinion on this new Friday the 13th film. What do you think? Is the Jason universe an exciting new venture into horror entertainment, or is it yet another clue that it's time for this franchise to die? Let me know in the comments, and thank you for watching ScreenRant.